The way that we're handling stress and the way that we're suppressing our emotions, I believe it will have long-term consequence if we don't start empowering people to really think about their health today. And so if you can think about, well, maybe it doesn't feel exciting to move my body in the morning. Maybe it doesn't feel exciting to sit and meditate. Maybe that feels challenging. Maybe it doesn't feel great right now to prep meals on Monday, and that might feel exhausting. But the very things that you're avoiding will impact your health in a positive way if you just get through that little bit of discomfort around it. It's definitely a tricky time, but sustainable habits are not, again, something you're going to be super excited about, but they will be something that you'll be so grateful. You'll look back and say, wow, I'm so thankful that I moved through the grumble and the discomfort and did these things for the last month versus drinking 1 or 2 glasses of wine every night or not moving my body.
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to another beautiful episode of Happiness from Within. I'm so excited that you're here with us. So today we have a really amazing guest. We're going to be talking about health today and her journey. Her name is Sarah Ann Stewart. Sarah is the founder of the awesome Inside Out movement. She's the author of the e-course Meditate Slim and an advisor to international wellness brands. When she's not at home in Los Angeles, she can be found leading transformative wellness experiences around the globe. Sarah Ann Stewart was thrown into the world of wellness as a teenager when her father was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. Her family made a choice to fight back with alternative medicine. 7 months later, her father was declared cancer-free, and a spark was lit in Sarah that propelled her to dedicate her life to spreading the healings her family had discovered. Today, as an integrative nutrition health coach, Sarah runs a leading private coaching practice with the focus on permanent weight loss. Her heart-centered approach has supported hundreds to lose weight naturally without crash dieting. So I actually have her here with us, here on the line. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I am amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here and excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, it was such a pleasure to meet you earlier this year, and really excited to share your holistic journey. You have such an incredible story. And because right now we're in the middle of a epidemic, how are you doing during this time? Because I know we're kind of all taking it differently.
100%. We are definitely all taking it differently. I think I am in this moment feeling very grateful that I have pulled out my toolkit of self-care practices and the things that I often, like everyone else, avoid, but I've been very disciplined the last probably month, 2 months to really make sure that I'm taking that extra time, because in the midst of all the stress, and although we feel like we're doing less maybe than we've ever done before, we still have the collective stress. And so I think it's more important than ever to really dedicate this time to self-care practices, to going within, to recognizing that there are often the emotions that we try to avoid with food and alcohol and sex and all the addictive sort of tendencies. I've been hearing a lot of that. I've been hearing a lot of the suppression of emotions, and I think it's very important that we feel into the emotions instead of suppressing them. But overall, I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for asking.
Absolutely. So the whole purpose here at Happiness from Within is to touch people's hearts and souls at a very deep level through interviews. And I'm so excited to share your story because we really talk a lot about healing. And I just think you're such a perfect example of that. But yeah, take us back, Sarah. Where are you from?
I am from a little town of Hazlet, Michigan. Very, very small town. It's outside of East Lansing. And I grew up there most of my life. Between the ages of 0 and 5, I was traveling the country with my dad, who was a public speaker. But then he decided he wanted to settle down for his kids. And so we grew up there, and my parents were really woo-woo. They were really holistic, and we were doing all of the spiritual things, going to shamans, deep diving into the reprogramming of the subconscious mind, into past life regression. And so for a girl growing up in a town that wasn't as accepting of those practices. I definitely had a very, very interesting experience growing up where a lot of the other kids were playing video games and I was learning about chakras. So, but I also am very blessed for that because I believe it saved my life. I believe having that foundation was one of the greatest things that could have happened to me growing up later on in life when I needed to go back and really dive deeper into my own awareness and shifting my relationship to my body and myself.
That's beautiful. Let's dive a little deeper to these woo-woo things. So did you have like in your backyard, did you have like herbs growing? Did you have your own garden? Tell us a little bit about this. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because my father was diagnosed with the heartbreaking news of terminal cancer when I was around the age of 14, 15. And I remember at that time I became very frustrated because he wasn't following the traditional medical advice or the Western doctor's advice from the perspective of we can maybe mitigate your symptoms to some extent and maybe extend your life a little bit longer, but this is pretty much going to be a terminal diagnosis. And so at that time, my dad said to the doctor, "Have you ever seen a miracle?" And the doctor said, "No, we don't really see miracles around here. This is doctor's office. Like what I usually diagnose usually happens." And I remember my dad just walking out and going home and meditating and really connecting with his intuition and his truth. And he just said, "Well, there's a reason why I'm sick. There's a reason why my lifestyle habits have gotten me to this place. And so there has to be a way that I can heal." And through that journey of going within and really cultivating this inner awareness, he was able to cure his cancer, which was diagnosed as a misdiagnosis. You can't use the word cure, but basically he went back in 7 months later and the cancer was completely gone. And this happened through a process of really looking within and then recognizing the power of food to heal. And he ended up being led on this journey through meditation to go back to the practices that have healed us for hundreds of years. And so he turned to a vegan diet. He cut out all sugar. We grew a garden in our backyard in the middle of a subdivision, which was very strange for people to see. We integrated wheatgrass. We had rows of wheatgrass growing in our garage. And again, people would open the garage and be like, "Are they growing pot? Like what's going on over there?" Like people didn't know really what was going on. And then he just put affirmations all over the house. We had them on whiteboards. He would walk every day and do yoga and meditation. And he did some other alternative medicine treatments, but the most part was basically through food. And what was so profound with that was that I remember witnessing it, and then the spark was lit inside of me, not necessarily because he had cured cancer, but because other people weren't talking about these modalities. Other people weren't talking about the healing power of a food. People weren't talking about the fact that you can actually cure and reverse chronic sickness through lifestyle habits. And I remember being so shocked, and I was shocked that the doctors didn't want to know about it, or really anyone in our community. It was kind of like, well, that's for them. They're doing their own thing over there. And that lit the spark in me that just propelled me to say, like, this has to be something that I talk about and educate other people on. The irony of it was at the same time I was scouted to model, which is a whole nother world, which we can talk about. But it's still, that moment led me down the road of really wanting to understand again why this wasn't public knowledge and really why other people weren't having this conversation.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you very much for opening up and sharing that. At what age were you when this happened, when your father was healed his body?
Yeah, so I was in my teens. And then at the same time, basically during the summers, I had been scouted to model. So I was going down to Chicago to work with an agency down there. And so the irony of it was I was witnessing and saw this power with food and how it could heal someone's chronic sickness, right? And something so heartbreaking. And then on the other hand, I was also recognizing how my relationship with food was really challenged. And I was cultivating this really unhealthy relationship with my body and food at the time, being in the industry of modeling. And so for me, it was about really going on my own path and my own journey. And I wanted to get out of this small town and I wanted to explore and see the big world. And so the city was such this eye-opening experience I had never had. And from there, it led me to Miami and New York and lots of other places. But again, the irony of it was that I thought that I had this really good head on my shoulders. I thought that I had grown up in this really beautiful environment in which I wouldn't fall victim of the fashion industry. And I was very wrong. And within 10 years of being in the industry, I was basically hospitalized and told that I needed to change my relationship to food in my body back to the way that I had saw while I was growing up, and really cultivate this healing relationship with food. And if I didn't, then I would most likely lose my life to anorexia at the time. And so that was my massive wake up call, my rock bottom, where I recognized that I had been sucked into a career that was no longer serving me, and I had to make a choice to leave. And through that process, I went back to nutrition school and studied everything I could about nutrition, because I thought that that was kind of my way out. I had saw that work for my father, and I believed that it would work for me as well. The interesting thing was that the more nutrition information I got, the worse my relationship with my body got. I was physically healing, but I wasn't emotionally and mentally healing from the aspect of when I got my picture taken, or saw myself in a mirror, or went on a date, or did any of the things that we do, right, as women. And so all of those experiences really were still very challenging for me. And that's when I had to go back and do the subconscious work, and I had to do the unlearning process and really healing my relationship with my body. And it took several years. And I always tell people this is a very patient process, and you can't expect it to be overnight. That's what we see in the media. That's what marketers want us to believe. But to really cultivate true health and well-being, it's not an overnight process. And that's what I learned. And that's my biggest mission, is to just help women really recognize that this is really about pulling layer by layer by layer back. It's not, and getting to the core of who we are, which is self-love. It's not, you're going to go do something externally and all of a sudden have that feeling of self-love. It doesn't work that way.
Wow, that's deep. So going back, before we go a little bit deeper into your journey of healing, what was it that got you into modeling? Were you in a pageant, or were you just like, I want to try this, or what led you in that direction when you were a teenager?
Yeah, so I was in a pageant, and I won most photogenic or something like that. That I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I was scouted to model, and I entered like a local modeling competition at a grocery store in my hometown, and ended up winning. And then from being scouted again, I was told, oh, you could really sign with a big agency in Chicago. And so it felt like the universe was kind of just, there was like this synchronicity of all these different experiences. Because again, this hometown, this really small place that I was from, didn't really have these type of opportunities. It wasn't that I was living in the big city or anything like that. And so for me, it just felt like the world was kind of cultivating to present me with this opportunity, which I today believe that I was meant to go down. I believe I was meant to model. I believe that it was part of my journey and part of my healing. And it allowed me to really witness the impact of the fashion industry and how hard it is and how challenging it is. But it also allowed me to be part of the problem, which allowed me to then help women recognize that as I was part of the problem. I was in magazines. Other women aspired to potentially, have the same size waist and hips and bust and all of the things. And so being part of the problem opened my eyes to the necessary changes that need to come forward in the fashion industry, and how important it is that we all take a stance for being a voice for change.
It's interesting. You actually being in the industry during this time, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that these young women go through? Like, do you see a lot of women going through anorexia, bulimia?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you see as like definitely wanting to be thin? But if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, for me personally, I got in it right before I really went through puberty. And so I was kind of going through puberty as I was in it. And I was also playing sports. And so for me, I had to give up sports, and I really had to focus on losing weight. I wasn't naturally a size 0 or 2. And so I think the challenge with women going into the industry is that there's a lot of there's definitely a lot of the glamorous lifestyle that is presented to them, and like, if you do these things, this is the life that you'll have, and then you'll be happy. And so it's again, like marketers present us with, it's like, you'll be happy if, you'll be happy when, you'll be happy on the other side of this experience. And whether that's losing the weight, getting eyelashes, getting plastic surgery, whatever it is, it's always, you'll be happy when. And so for me, it was this constant search of happiness and external validation. And as soon as you book a job or land a contract, then you're always seeking it again and again and again. And there's no one, well, I'm only speaking for myself, but there was no one in the industry that really taught me that happiness exists within me. It's something that is already within me, and I can find it in the littlest, most mundane parts of my life, in the day-to-day experiences. And it doesn't have to be on the other side of a massive contract or a lot of money coming in, or a glamorous photo shoot, or going out with a celebrity, or doing these things that are so much advertised to these young girls. And right now we're seeing it more than ever on social media, where you can become very famous overnight on social media. And it's extremely, extremely problematic. And it's something I think we all need to confront and have a conversation on, and be open to really looking at, okay, how I'm presenting myself on Instagram or on social media, how is that impacting others? And am I being honest and transparent about my life? And I think that's one of the good ways that we can start showing up and empowering young girls to really be honest on social media, so we're not in this constant comparison and jealousy experience all the time.
Absolutely. Wow. I love that. Just goes with the title of the podcast, right? Happiness from within.
Yeah, I didn't even need to do that. That's so funny.
That was perfect. You know, it's so crazy. I was literally just thinking in my head, I was like, that's going to be one of the questions I was going to ask you, and you beautifully answered it. So that's beautiful. You know, it's interesting you're talking about, you know, the honesty, and because there's a lot of fake stuff on social media, as we know. Mm-hmm. And you had shared it's a perfect transition into what we were going to go to. You had I love your social media. I mean, you're so
Thank you.
Open, authentic, raw. I mean, just so honest. And I recall that you had posted a post that I believe it was really difficult for you to post, and but you came out, and then you just inspired like all these women. But can we transition into that through your healing journey, if you don't mind sharing, because you have such an amazing story.
Yeah. And so I want to preface first that there's been multiple times in my life that I've had to kind of go on this healing journey, and I don't think it's ever ending. I think as we get older and our bodies change, and you know, different experiences and things come into our life and things happen, we're always having to go inward. We're always having to really look within and say, what is best for me in this moment? What can I do moving forward to really cultivate greater sense of self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-love? And I don't believe that journey ever ends. I don't think that there's, I second that. Yes, you know, yes. I don't think that there's a day where I wake up and again, I want to share this because so many women will look at my Instagram and they are like, how do you wake up happy and confident every single day? And I have to remind everyone I don't. And there's been many times in my healing journey where I've been up against the wall and I've had to, again, like I was talking about in the beginning, pull out my toolkit of different self-care practices and meditation and mindfulness techniques and forgiveness letters and affirmations and visualizations, and use them to really support myself with whatever I'm faced with that day. And so my healing journey, there's been multiple things that have specifically have happened, but as I shared before, the biggest one was confronting the eating disorder and how down the rabbit hole I was with just the disconnection from my own body. I had only identified myself with Sarah, the physical, Sarah as 5'10" with a certain hair color, as a certain size. And I didn't ever connect to the Sarah that exists within me, the one with resilience and courage and the ability to do literally whatever I wanted to do. But at that time, I was so broken and so beat down and so disconnected from my own truth that I had to really go through this journey. And the journey was about meeting a seventh lineage guru, working with him and unlearning basically all of these mindsets, all of these beliefs, all of these stories, all of the projections and the wounding patterns that I had taken on from the relationships I was in, the friendships I had cultivated, the community I was around, my agents, even family members, different dynamics with different people in my life. And then also media, cultural conditioning, societal conditioning. I had to look at every single story in which I was operating from and notice within those moments and become self-aware of whether or not those stories were serving me or not. And 99% of the stories I was operating from were not serving me. There were comparison and jealousy, and that happiness exists outside of me and self-love exists outside of me. And I'll only feel certain ways if I look a certain way. And even to this day, that's very hard to admit. It's hard for me to admit that was a place in my life, because now I teach people the complete opposite. But it's important for people to hear that, because they can recognize how far they can come in, just a few short years of doing the inner work. And so during this journey, I sat with myself every day for 20 minutes twice a day, if not longer, sometimes hours on end, just connecting to my truth, connecting to the space between my thoughts, connecting to my awareness, connecting to my own intuition. And because I had so much nutrition information at that point, I had to say, well, what if these experts aren't right? And what if I'm the only expert of my body? How do I bring myself back to my truth? How do I bring myself back to me and really being able to hear what is good for me in this moment? And that was baby steps. It was one step at a time, really taking the next step and saying, okay, well, this feels good for me. This self-care practice feels good for me. Taking time and sitting on a beach alone, being with my thoughts, sitting in front of a mirror naked, being with my thoughts, writing this forgiveness letter to my mother, and the relationship that we have felt good for me. Like I had to go into these practices and just be with myself. And it took a lot of time. And I always tell people that our relationship with food in our body is not something that we can heal overnight. I mean, people do recommend certain medicinal practices and ayahuasca and things. And yes, that can help. But I really believe that this is, again, like a lifelong journey. And it's something that does take quite a bit of unconditioning, because most likely your mother didn't know how to love her body. Your grandmother didn't know how to love your body. Your friends don't know how to love their bodies. You open a magazine and they're not talking about loving yourself unconditionally, regardless of how you look. They actually want to sell you something and market you something. And so you have to break down every single story that you've been taught from almost every single person in your life, unless you have a really good mentor. And so that process took time. And then to fast forward to another part of my healing journey was my explant journey, in which I had to get my implants out. And that was, again, many years later, while I was coaching women about self-love and self-confidence, I had to go through this process of using all the tools again as I was getting my implants out, and really witnessing what it would feel like to not have my implants as part of my identity anymore, who I was and what that would mean to me. And that was another big healing journey.
Wow. If you don't mind taking us back to that moment, like the day that, you decided to do that. Like, I mean, excuse my language, but I mean, were you scared as shit? You're like, man, I had these things put in so I could but what was that moment like for you? I mean, I'm not saying it was just that moment, but just anything you'd like to share, just that.
Yeah. So I ended up starting to get serious symptoms from my implants about 2 years before I got them out. And I was getting heart palpitations and rashes and pain under my armpits. And a lot of very strange, bizarre symptoms. And there is no actual medical diagnosis for breast implant illness, but a lot of women right now are sharing online and publicly that they are sick from their implants. And we're now seeing a lot of research and science being done around this topic where we didn't when I was starting to get sick. And so all of the research and all of the science was really based on other women sharing. And so I started to hear of other women that were getting sick as well. And then I started to notice that all of these varying degrees of symptoms were getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where I couldn't get out of the bed in the morning. I was taking dozens of supplements just to keep going. I had to shut my business down for quite some time. I really couldn't function. I was having brain fog and memory loss. And there's a point where I just really felt like I was dying, and I felt so lost and so confused. And I luckily met a doctor who she had the courage to tell me, you can keep covering up this problem with more supplements, or you can walk across the street and get your implants out, because there was an explant doctor across the street in Beverly Hills. And I just trusted her in that moment. And I just believed her. And I said, if this has to be it, I don't know what else to do at this point. And what was so powerful was within a couple of weeks of getting my implants out, my symptoms started to subside, and I really started to regain my health back. But to answer your question about what it felt like when I was getting them out, I went through probably every emotion that I've ever felt in my lifetime over the two weeks before and probably 2 weeks after. I had relief, I had excitement, I had fears, I had worry, I confronted my self-love and self-worth and self-esteem, and I had to dig up the anger within myself that had gotten the implants to begin with. I had to move into forgiveness. And I reference this because, and I share this because I think we have moments where we can experience excitement and we can experience fear or insecurity at the same time. And I think a lot of women think it has to be one or the other, but it can actually be both. You can be excited for something and still mourning your old self. You can be elated that you're all of a sudden going to not be sick anymore, but also feel the sadness of how you're not going to look anymore. And so it's okay to have those experiences both at the same time. And using the tools and the practices of mindfulness and meditation, we can always get to the place where between the thoughts, between the excitement and the fear, is our truth, which is our intuition. And it strengthens our intuition to really connect to that level of awareness and recognize, for me, the greatest place was my intuition was saying, you have to get these implants out. You absolutely need to get these implants out. There's no other discussion. There's no more monkey mind. There's no more tennis match in your head. This is absolutely the direction you have to go. And I think when you connect to that, then the varying degrees of emotion don't matter so much anymore, because it's the truth beyond the mind. And the mind will always continue to play tricks on you. And that's where I think people get stuck, as we go from the excitement to the fear and back and forth, and we waver. And then it's like, well, what if that didn't exist? What would be the truth beyond those stories? And that's where we have to get to, whether we're connecting to what we need to eat every day, how we need to move, our self-care practices, who we should have in our life, what career we need to be in, our relationship. All of those answers are beyond the mind. It's the space beyond the mind that allows us to hear our intuition and deepen and strengthen the intuition, so that we know what direction to take, which will cultivate, as you talk about a lot with the happiness podcast, will cultivate those deeper levels of happiness.
Wow, Sarah, you've really gone through a lot. Wow. I'd like to go a little bit deeper. What does it mean? What does it mean living in your truth? I know there's so many different ways, but just whatever comes to mind. I know you mentioned a few things, but what does that mean for you?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think for me, what I've noticed in myself, and this is a lesson that I am still learning, and something that has been a big sort of light that's come forward this year, is is your truth today doesn't mean that it's going to be your truth tomorrow. It doesn't mean that it's your truth in a week. Like, you are allowed to change your truth. You're allowed to grow and become the better version of you. And that means that who you are is going to be different yesterday than it is today. And I think so often people get very stuck in the, well, this is my truth and this is the path and this is what I need to be on my entire life, and I can't waver and I can't change because this is how I grew up, and this is what's going to bring me happiness down there on the road, 1 month, 2 months, a year from now, if I just keep going. And what I've recognized in myself is, what if I could give myself the permission to not know? And I think that is the difference between like being in your truth and just saying, oh my gosh, I have to literally like know everything right now. And I have to know exactly what to do and what career to be in and what relationship to be in and how many kids to have. And if I want the white picket fence and I want this much money. But what if you just took on, and so it's a little bit different than what most people deem as truth, is what I've been trying to take on. And the lesson I've been learning is, what if I don't know? Like, what if I just get curious? And what if through curiosity and through experimentation and through play and through just feeling into what will bring me the most joy in each moment, I get to stand in my truth right then instead of trying to plan it all out. And so for me, that's been one of the greatest lessons of this year. And it's so interesting because even when I'll hear my family member say something like, well, that wasn't your opinion a few months ago. And I'm like, well, my opinion has changed. Or like my husband will say something, I'll be like, well, now this is my truth. And I just want to offer that to the listener, because so often we get so dogmatic and so stuck in our ways that we're not allowing ourselves to go beyond the mind and see the potential of what else is out there. And so for me, it's closing my eyes, connecting to my heart, being in the space between my thoughts, and just asking, what if I don't know? What if I get curious? What if I allow myself to be in this moment and to just trust in what comes forward and it's aligned with my highest good, and also trust in my ability to pivot and make change based on what feels more aligned. And so for me, that's what I've been playing around with. I don't know if it fully answers your question, but it's just this curiosity of play and being able to change. And I think so often it's not related to tapping into like your truth, but it's similar in the sense where there's a lot of people talking about self-love right now, where people are like, well, if I love myself, I'm going to stay complacent and I'm going to stay in the same behavior patterns, and I'm going to allow myself to maybe behave in ways that aren't serving my highest good. I think it's similar in the sense where, what if you loved yourself as you are right now, but you were still aware that there's a greater version and evolution and growth opportunities that can come forward? And so it's similar in the sense of like, well, I'm going to witness what's true for me right now. But what if I get really curious, and I've always been this way politically, or I've always been this way in believing certain journalists, or I've always been this way in believing certain health experts. What if I get curious that there might be another way? What would that do, and how might that help me grow if I'm not boxed in to a belief system that I've had my whole life?
Wow. I love that. I never heard it put that way, of how our truth always changes. That's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a new concept for me, and I'm playing around with it. And I think there's beyond that, there's that your truth is rooted in love. It's rooted in what's best for your highest good. It's rooted in your evolution. It's rooted in growth. But beyond that, it's like, what if it's curiosity instead of being stuck in a belief system that you've had your whole life?
Wow. I'd love to go a little bit deeper, if that's okay. I've never heard of this self-practice of being naked in front of the mirror. I'm curious, what is, I mean, you don't have to go through the whole process, but just, maybe someone listening right now, a woman listening, is just like, oh, I want to try that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
or that combination with journaling. I'm really fascinated to learn this, man. I want to start this tonight. So if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, of course. So there's a practice called mirror work by Louise Hay. It's not a practice that I invented or created. And there's an actual 21-day program that Louise Hay offers, and it's in a book called Mirror Work. But I've taken some of the practices and just applied them to my own life, and so I can share those. But basically, mirror work is the process of being in front of the mirror and having to hear yourself speak good thoughts about yourself, which is very, very hard for most people. It's very hard to look at yourself and say, wow, you're this courageous, resilient, beautiful woman who can conquer the world, who can do whatever she wants, who can show up for herself today, who can be empowered. And in doing so, you're actually often recognizing the parts of yourself that feel insecure about saying these different things. And so for me, I've done it naked and not naked. I like the non-naked approach if you're having insecurity around your body. And that's what I did a lot of work on when I was going through my breast implant journey, where I would look at my body and say, I still love you exactly as you are, with or without the implants. I still am empowered to show up as a woman who is resilient, as an entrepreneur who creates impact, with or without my implants. And so I would kind of cultivate these different affirmations based on what I was experiencing or going through. And that's the beautiful thing about affirmations, and the beautiful thing about mirror work is you can tweak the affirmations to really represent or be reflective of anything that you're experiencing that might be hard or challenging or maybe out of alignment in that moment. And so when you hear the voice of the negativity, what would be the opposite of that story? And then if you can write down what the opposite of that story would be, then you can give yourself this opportunity to go to the mirror, to look at yourself in the mirror, to confront the parts of yourself that might be challenged, and to say these statements out loud. And the other thing that I really love about mirror work, which I took on as well, is so many coaches talk about looking at the parts of yourself that you love and starting there. And I think that that's great, but I also think it's great to look at the parts that you don't love and to be with those parts and to feel into, why don't I love my thighs? Why don't I love my butt? Why don't I love my stomach? Why don't I love my arms? Why don't I love certain aspects of my face? Where are those stories coming from? Who told me that I shouldn't love these parts of myself? And then again, going into the unlearning process of, wow, I took that story on from my mom, from a teacher, from a mentor, from a friend, from someone on the playground. That's not my story anymore. And I'm actually going to send that part of my body so much love because of what it does offer to me. And then cultivating gratitude around that part of yourself. And so there's all these different little practices that you can do around mirror work, but I think it's just such a beautiful place to start, specifically if you're having a hard time speaking good things about yourself or feeling insecure. I do believe it's one of the most powerful ways to start to shift those beliefs. And as you do the work, you'll start to rewire the different neural pathways in your brain, and then you'll search for that story much easier than potentially the older stories as you do them more and more often.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, Louise Hayes is amazing. She's fortunately not alive anymore, but yeah, she's definitely just left so much beautiful work for, I think forever. She was definitely a beautiful beacon of light for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So my next question is you help women with, you give them the tools for losing weight. And I would love to dig a little bit deeper of maybe somebody listening, if it resonates with them and they're interested in working with you. But yeah, how is it that you do that? What is your approach on that?
Yeah, so my approach is really interesting, because when women normally come to me, there's a couple things that we always talk about first, which is, are you trying to lose weight for a certain reunion, or are you trying to lose weight for potentially a partner, or to go dating more, or to what is the experience on the other side of the weight that you really want to have. And the work that I really do is helping them and empowering them that they can have those experiences now. They don't need to lose the weight, and they can have the feelings that they're searching on the other side of those experiences now without losing the weight. And we always go through a list of, well, what are the feelings that you want to have? And then I always help them and present to them that all of those feelings are available in this moment if they choose to embody a new story, that it's available now. It's not something that has to be postponed or delayed. And so the work is really about looking at all of these stories that have been projected on them, looking at all of the stories that we've taken on throughout our lives and saying, well, how do we create new beliefs around weight loss where maybe you don't even actually want to lose weight? Maybe it's something where you just want to get healthier. Maybe there's a story around that you can't have a certain thing in your life without the weight loss. And then again, helping them recognize that they absolutely can, and what are the parts of their mind that are blocking that experience from coming forward, or for allowing that manifestation to happen. And most often those are financial, abundance related, often relationship related, career related. Maybe they want to create an experience in their lives, and they believe that on the other side of weight loss, that experience will happen. And then really helping them connect to their greater purpose, their greater why beyond the weight loss. And so there's nothing wrong with wanting to physically lose weight, but it's not a sustainable goal. And so there has to be this greater sustainable motivation that we connect to. And so through the process of meditation and mindfulness, what it usually looks like is connecting to a greater why. And so why do you want to be alive? What is the impact you want to have? What are the people that you want in your life 10, 20, 30 years down the road? What are the experiences you want to have? What do you want to do on this planet? What is your soul purpose? What is the spiritual purpose for you being here? And when people connect to that, the motivation changes. Because I always say that if you truly want to be alive on this planet, you will take care of yourself, because your body is your vessel. It's the vehicle to be able to do all of the things that you truly want to do. And so when we have that greater purpose for being alive, we will connect to that and then tap into that and really, really be able to do the things that are hard. And I want to also remind people that, you know, people will look at my Instagram or look at my account or look at how I live and be like, I just don't love prepping food every day and moving my body. And I don't love all these things that you do. And I'm like, I don't love them either. like there are days I don't want to eat organic raw salad anymore. There are days when I don't want to move my body. There are days when I hate my self-care practices, or I don't want to do the things that I've been avoiding. And I have my deeper why, my purpose, my reason to be alive, and the reason to take care of my body. And so I do them. And I just want to share that and tell everyone that like health is not something that you wake up every day and you're just like, yay, like I get to be healthy. I get to wake up 20 minutes early to write a forgiveness letter. Like that is, or do a journal or meditate. Like I'm not always excited to do these self-care practices, but they give me that ability to be healthy and energized and vital and enjoy my life, and bringing it back to the happiness component on the other side of a lot of these practices. That's where the happiness is. That's because I get to have the experiences because I'm healthy and well. And so that's my mission, and like my purpose is to help people find that inside themselves. It's not to be excited every day to cook a meal.
Wow, that's amazing. I actually had somebody that had a question for you through the Instagram. They wanted me to ask you, what is your approach on, well, there's all these like amazing products, right? Like take 2 shakes a day and 1 meal and you can lose weight, and it works, right? But I was just curious what your thoughts were on that. I mean, obviously everybody's different if that's what they want to do and that makes them happy. Mm-hmm. But since your main focus is weight loss, I just wanted to know, like, if a woman asks you that, a potential client, what is your answer for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question. And from a weight loss perspective, or even just a health perspective, there are absolutely shakes and organic products and supplements. And I take many, many supplements, and I take shakes, and I do a lot of the what people would deem sort of the quick fix solutions, right? I think it's how you relate to the product that's more important than the actual product. And that doesn't mean there's not bad products out there, and we shouldn't watch for those and be really careful about them. And there are definitely products that have unhealthy ingredients in them, and we need to be careful about that. But I think it's the relationship to the product. And that's why I don't start with food and movement in my programs. So I always start with self-love, self-worth, self-esteem. That's usually the first week. Then we move to forgiveness. We move through mindsets and stories and programming and mindfulness techniques and meditation. And then we go back to the food and movement. Because if you start with food and movement, then the blame usually is on the food and movement. It's usually like, well, I can't buy that product because it's too expensive, or I can't move my body that way like this celebrity is doing it, or I don't have a gym at home, now during COVID. And so if we don't change the fundamental thoughts and programming that it is happening all day long in our minds, it's really challenging to even be motivated to take the steps regardless of what shake it is. I can tell you so many clients who have come to me have literally a pantry of supplements and shakes that they haven't touched, or they'll have the elliptical in the corner of their office or their home that they never get on. And that's because of the thoughts. That's because of the belief systems. That's because of their own self-worth and self-confidence and their beliefs within themselves. And so if you don't start with that, you can do a shake for 2 weeks, but at the end of the day, like, are you going to sustain it? And the challenge I see is you won't sustain it when you start feeling good, because you don't feel worthy of feeling good. And so these shakes and these different things can absolutely make an impact depending on which ones they are, but you have to feel worthy and step into that healthier self, and then be able to sustain it and not allow your thoughts to sabotage the behavior, which then impacts your long-term goals.
Wow, that was deep. I like that. Another question that I had from another young woman, she asked, she's always struggled with pretty much a lot of her life, in her 20s and 30s. She's almost going into her 40s, like losing and gaining weight. And does that, I mean, it's obviously looking at the bigger picture, but is a lot of that due to not feeling worthy? Obviously, I know you don't know a lot about her, but just.
Yeah, it is a bit challenging, because I would need to ask like a lot of other questions.
Sure. But just like his patterns that you've seen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can say a couple of things. I mean, the dieting industry wants you to fail, because if you fail, you buy more dieting products, or you go on another protocol, or you start something new. And so most often the quick fix dieting programs, and again, I don't know what she's doing, and so it's a little bit hard to say, but most of those programs are very much set up to make you fail. Like they're not there to create sustainable change. And the reason they're not creating sustainable change is because they're focusing on one aspect of themselves, which is or one aspect of the client, which is the physical, right? They're not working on the emotional components, the mental components, the spiritual components, the purpose components of why do you want to be alive, like I shared before. And so I would be really curious to ask her if the fluctuations reflect different periods of her life, if they reflect times where she maybe was lonely and sad, if when she does start to lose the weight and she begins to get healthier, what are the feelings and the emotions that are starting to surface, if there's a story that's coming forward. And again, I don't know her, so I'm again, this is all hypothetical, but maybe
Sure.
Maybe there's something where the discomfort is serving her. Maybe there's something where she doesn't feel worthy of having a more energetic, life. I would really have to sit down with her, but there's so many different things that can impact when we start to feel good, and then we're like, oh, who am I to be healthy when everyone around me is sick? And that's what's happening right now more than ever during COVID, is like, who am I to feel good when everyone is struggling and suffering? And that brings us down because we have that story. And so we have to become very, very conscious and self-aware of every single story that is impacting how we relate to our body. And I can tell you from my own experience, only through being empowered and coming from a place of health and well-being and vitality do you actually inspire people. And so from that place of happiness and being energized and self-aware and self-confident, then you're inspiring people. And so what if we flip the script to like, who am I not to be happy right now? Everyone's suffering. So I want to be a leader and an example of what I can actually create right now during COVID. And this is the opportunity to show people that it's possible to move through this time with yes, confronting the challenging times, but move through it with grace and ease and understanding and gratitude for what it's bringing forward. And so what if that's the opportunity? And so again, I don't know her.
No, that was a great answer. I really love, my favorite part was when you said is, where is she at in her life? So
right.
The woman that's listening to that, that's actually a really good point, Sarah. And thank you for pointing that out. Is like, we're all at different parts of our life. We could be kind of like we were talking about our truth. It could be something one day and the next day it changes. Right? Everything's always evolving and changing. So that was really deep what you said. So your programs, are they like 3-6 month programs? Like, how do they work?
Yep. So I normally work with women for 3 months and 3 to 6 months. And that's like a good amount of time to really get a sense of what's happening and really support them and really creating these massive shifts and creating and cultivating new belief systems that are replacing these old stories that are no longer serving them. And so I've been doing that, but I do have 2 new programs coming out, which I'm really excited about.
Would you like to talk about those?
Yeah, one of they're both called, one is a meditation program and the other one is an 8-week course. And the name of that course is Fire Your Diet. And so that will be out in about a month or so.
What was the name of it again?
Fire Your Diet.
Ooh, love it.
Yeah. And then I have a few challenges that are coming out and a body love quiz, and I'm always kind of running different things. And so I'm happy to share any of those things if people want more support or content for free.
No, absolutely. And I definitely will make sure to put the links for that below. I just have a few more questions. This has been a really awesome interview. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
So it's such an honor just connecting with other people in the holistic. It's very, it's just beautiful. So my other question for you is, I had a young woman, one more young woman, she was asking about like, going from 30s, to the 40s, like, is there advice that you would give to, not to exclude women going from their 20s to 30s, but just any advice that you have? Because it seems like the 30s going into 40s is like, oh my God, like you feel like you're almost 50, even though you're not 50. But I mean, obviously every age has its beautiful, like,
yeah.
I just wanted to know if you had any advice for somebody listening, because it was actually a question that came up a few times. So
yeah, I think it doesn't matter if you're going from 20s to 30s, 30s to 40s, 40s to 50s. I think the advice I would give to anyone in transition is that until you do the inner work, your mind is just going to go with you. And so we think that when we're 20, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm insecure because, I have to be in a bathing suit and take a picture and I'm going to be on the beach with these boys. But then we don't recognize that same story gets transferred to when we're 30 and we're like, okay, well now I'm having kids and I feel insecure about my body. And then it gets transferred to 40 and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm almost 40. And I'm feeling insecure because how is my partner going to relate to me? The insecurities and the stories change, but it's still the underlying current that is existing within us. And so my advice to anyone who is suffering with food in their body to any degree is to start doing the inner work. And whether that's hiring a coach or meditating or signing up for an online program or doing some journal work or affirmations, visualizations, it doesn't matter what approach you start with, but it's just about the self-awareness piece of recognizing, oh my gosh, what is that story that's following me from age to age to age? And what would it look like if I was able to heal that part of myself so that this story doesn't go with me anymore, so that I can be 80 and just so pumped for life and so excited and vital and have energy and just recognizing that I can be on top of the world. Like, what would that feel like if in 30, 40 years, that was my truth and that these beliefs didn't carry with me over the next, 20, 30, 40 years? What would be different? What would that change in my life? And how much energy and time would I save by not having these stories dictate my life anymore?
Wow. Love that. And what sort of advice would you give for anybody listening, watching? So right now, as we know, we're going through this global epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
Just anything you'd like to share. It could be 1, 2, 3, I guess, self practices, whether it has to do with food, spirituality, just anything that comes to your heart that somebody can apply today.
Yeah. So this is similar to what I was sharing earlier about the self-care practices. And what I think is most important right now is recognizing that self-care and taking care of your mind, body, and spirit it's not going to look the same for everyone. And so being very conscious that what you see on social media, where it's like, I do this and this and this in my morning, well, maybe that doesn't work for you, or maybe you want to do that at night, or maybe you want to do it in your afternoon. So again, coming back, connecting with yourself, recognizing, where do you feel off? When do you feel off? When is tension arising? When are you starting to get anxious? When are you starting to feel stressed? And then really becoming conscious of, well, how do I cultivate the self-care practices in my life so that I can pattern interrupt these different feelings or emotions that come forward? And that doesn't mean that you're not feeling the emotion. It just means that you're managing the stresses that are arising and you're not suppressing them. And again, what I'm hearing that alcohol sales are up 400% right now. And so
Wow.
This is extremely problematic. It's like the way that we're handling stress and the way that we're suppressing our emotions, I believe it will have long-term consequence if we don't start empowering people to really think about their health today. And so if you can think about, well, maybe it doesn't feel exciting to move my body in the morning. Maybe it doesn't feel exciting to sit and meditate. Maybe that feels challenging. Maybe it doesn't feel great right now to prep meals on Monday, and that might feel over exhausting. But the very things that you're avoiding will impact your health in a positive way if you just get through that little bit of discomfort around it. And then also just becoming aware of how the practices that you're using to avoid your emotions or numb yourself are impacting your health as well. And so it's definitely a tricky time, but sustainable habits are not, again, something you're going to be super excited about, but they will be something that you'll be so grateful. You'll look back and say, wow, I'm so thankful that I moved through the grumble and the discomfort and did these things for the last month versus drinking 1 or 2 glasses of wine every night or not moving my body. And I can tell you from personal experience, the first couple months of COVID were very hard. I gained a significant amount of weight. I was not taking care of myself. I was on the screen all the time. So I was like, well, what else can I do? And so that relationship with my computer became very toxic. And I had to pivot and I had to make a change. And I had to say, I've got to get back into being outdoors and being in nature and moving my body and speaking to the people I love. And it's just about pivoting. It's about looking and saying, okay, this isn't serving me. This will serve me. Getting from here to here is definitely going to cause some discomfort, but it's worth it for the long-term sustainable results. And I always do a practice where I close my eyes, connect to my heart, and just think about, what do I need to do to feel good in a month from now, 6 months, and a year from now? And if a year from now feels like too much, just connect to a month from now. Like what do I need to do? And just visualize what needs to be done. So in a month from now, you can feel better in your mind and body. Like, what does that look like? And the beautiful thing is, through your intuition, those practices will come forward. It's just taking the courageous step to actually do them.
Wow. That is so beautiful. Well, Sarah, I just realized, thank you so much for this beautiful, beautiful interview. Are there any last minute words, anything you'd like to share before we conclude?
I think for any woman that is listening who has struggled with body image issues or has struggled with their relationship with food, I believe that taking on the belief of or the energy, we could call it energy, there's an acceptance and surrender energy that when you take on, you free yourself. And what this means is that when you take on the acceptance that you can't change your DNA, you can't change your body, you can't change how you look, you can't change who you are beyond a certain extent, right? We were born into this body. This is the body that we were gifted with. I believe from a spiritual perspective, we chose this body. And so when we step into the acceptance of that and the surrender that this is the vehicle and the vessel we have for our life, we free ourselves from the emotional energy of the comparison and the jealousy. And when we do that, oftentimes what I see is that we go through this mourning process because most of our life from a marketing perspective, we've been told that we could look like someone else if we buy this product, if we use this supplement, if we use this dieting pill, if we buy this 8-minute ab workout, right? We're like literally promised that we could be someone else on the other side of the product. So in our minds, we keep thinking that we could potentially literally look like someone else. And so the moment that we actually accept who we are, we go through this mourning process that we actually can't look like someone else. But then what happens is we free ourselves to unlimited joy. And we also step into, well, if I'm going to accept and surrender to this body, then what do I need to do to keep it healthy? And it's just one of the many beautiful mindset shifts that we can take on when we truly start to say, well, this is what I've been taught my whole life, but like, what's this over here? This is a different story. And what if I operate from this new story, which is just accepting that this is my body and I'm going to show up and do everything I can to keep it healthy. And it's these little mindset shifts that just make such a massive difference in the way we relate to ourselves. And so hopefully that will inspire some women to rethink the way that they view their bodies.
Wow, that is so beautiful. That really touched my heart. I was like, wow. Well, Sarah, where can people find you?
People can find me, I guess the best way is on the gram. It's at Sarah Ann Stewart, Sarah with an H, so SARAHANNE, Stewart, STEWART. And yes, if anyone has any questions or wants to connect, I would love to connect with you there and drop me a message. I have plenty of free resources to support you if that's something you're interested in.
Wow. Sarah, well, I really want to thank you from my heart to yours. I honor your presence. Thank you so much for this beautiful interview. We'll definitely have to do a round two maybe sometime next year. But yeah, thank you so much. And this episode will, it'll be coming out this year. I don't have an exact date yet, but I definitely will let you know on my audience. But again, thank you so much. And I just wish you a great rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Have a great evening. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much for your flexibility with time, and have a great rest of your week, okay?
You too. Stay in touch. Thank you so much. Yeah, bye.